Welcome to Short and to the Point, a podcast from the Comeback in Awful Announcing. Here's your host, Jessica Kleinschmidt.
Hi, everyone. Welcome back to Short and to the Point on Awful Announcing and the Comeback. Jessica Kleinschmidt here, sprinting toward the finish line that is known as the Major League Baseball season. I'm dying, y'all. I'm dying. Like I'm very happy and I'm loving it, but it is insane in these parts. Of course, it's the last home series ever at the Coliseum coming up. So leading into that has just been emotional and a lot, but I appreciate you guys checking in on me and listening to the podcast once again. Love the guest this week, Kacy Standohar. She's a Chicago-based reporter. She does the Big East, FS1, the Fighting Illini. The girls that get it is pretty much the theme of this episode because, and I just talked to Darren Sutton about this, baseball royalty, if you will. And you need somebody in your corner when you're covering sports for a living that just get what you're dealing with. It's tough and it's different for women, especially. We go over that not too much because let's be honest, going down the road of why it's a struggle for women in sports always stresses me out. But it's something that we can't ignore. So it was great to hear from her. And she grinded. I love a grinder. I really appreciated all the hard work that she put in, not your typical road to what she's doing now. And I definitely gained a new friend after this. So I'm really excited. So without further ado, here's my chat with Kacy. Well, Kacy, first of all, I'm so excited to have you. So welcome to Short and to the Point. We have a lot to go over, but here you are. You're here.
Jessica, I'm here. Thank you so much. I've been following your work from afar, and so I'm excited we finally got to do this.
Me as well. So I'm just going to get right to it. You said something on a podcast when I was prepping for this, and it sounds so simple, but I love the way that you were explaining it. You said fake it till you make it. Mm-hmm. And your background and how you got here is so amazing because it wasn't the traditional route. No. So tell me about this term that you use and why you go by it.
Yeah, it sounds silly, right? But I think you have to kind of manifest where you want to be and who you want to be. And I remember kind of my non-traditional start where I didn't have that local sports station background. I was a producer, yes, which was helpful. But on air, it really all started for me in 2018. And I moved to Chicago and I kind of said, I'm going to find a way. I don't know what it's going to look like yet. And I came here with kind of blind optimism. I was like, I'm going to work in Chicago. And all of a sudden I was like, whoa. This is going to be really hard, but it's good that you're still confident because you can do this. And so I just started building connections and worked for free in the beginning and kind of would shoot stand-ups like even outside of Wrigley Field or the United Center. And people would be like, what are you doing? Like, who are you trying to be? And I'm like, just give me a year or two. Like, you'll see. So it was that fake it till you make it thing where it's like, I've got to build a reel from scratch. I've got to grind, I've got to hustle, but I'll find a way. And I'm really proud that I did.
I am too. And you mentioned you're going to find a way. You mentioned this confidence. Mm-hmm. It's not like something you take a class for, right? So right. What can you contribute to that characteristic?
Yeah. So many people have told me, and I'm so honored to hear this. They're like, wow, you really hustle. And I'm like, I'm so glad that that's how I'm known, that I'm a hustler. I'm okay with that. It's like I've had to rent cars to get to games and travel far distances and do things that maybe people are like, oh, that's just the juice isn't worth the squeeze. And, as you advance in your career, yeah, you could start saying no to stuff. But I think what I had is that intangible hustle and work ethic and just the drive to say, I'm going to wake up and keep going, even on days when this sucks and I don't love it. And I have days where I'm like, what am I doing? Like you have days of doubt, right? I'm sure you have too. And because it's so competitive, it's so crazy, it's so subjective. And I just keep knowing that it's what wakes me up in the morning and gets me out of bed. And so I feel like sometimes you just can't teach that. And so I'm glad I have that. I'm glad my parents kind of instilled that in me. And I've had good mentors and, cheerleaders along the way because as you know, Jess, like there are days when you're like, I don't know if I could keep doing this, you know, but then you keep doing it, and then things start to shift. So
tell me about the days of doubt, because we could easily say that happened earlier on in the infancy of our career, but do those doubts still happen these days?
yeah, I think even more so now, right?
Yeah.
In the beginning, you're kind of just like taking whatever you can and hustling, but now you're overthinking every conversation you have, and you're like, wow, you know, I hope I made a good impression here. I hope I did this right. And I think when you get closer and closer to your goals, and their goals are always changing, right? But when you get closer and closer to those goals, you start to doubt even more. You're like, am I cut out for this? Is this working? Is this just too competitive? Am I running out of time? All these like things that you might feel. And I don't know. I just, I have really great people in my corner who have like talked me out of that and said, yeah, you're on the right track. Look at this positive momentum that you're gaining. So I don't want people to think, and I know we just talked about this too, that it's always like roses and everything's awesome. And, it's such a cool job, because it is cool, right?
Yeah.
But there's so much behind it that you have to grind. And like, I'll have some students reach out to me from different universities, and they're like, I want to be a sideline reporter. And I'm like, are you ready to grind? Like, are you ready to do the work? Like, whether it's pre and post, local, sideline, whatever it is, it's not always like easy. And not everyone, I think a lot of these students are like, well, who tells you what to say? Well, how do you prep? What do you like?
Here, let me just interrupt you for a second. Not to be rude. Have you ever, I don't want to be feminist, but I've noticed I've never seen a male colleague of mine be asked the question, you know, do they feed you the questions, or do you come up with them yourself?
It's like the assumption that we don't know what we're talking about.
I've never heard, and I talked to I call him my work husband, Martin Gallegos. He covers the A's for MLB.com for like a decade now. And I asked him, I was like, has anybody ever asked you if your producer feeds you the questions? He's like, no. And I was like, I get asked that probably 4 or 5 times a year.
Right.
So that's what's interesting, is they don't think that we prep on our own.
Yeah, because I know it might be cliche, but we're still trying to break the stigma of like women in play-by-play roles, women in bigger analyst roles, women on the sidelines. We're still trying to like break those barriers and say, yeah, of course we do this. Like, it's fine. And I think people are still like, oh, I don't, and it's gotten better, right? Like people were like, oh, I don't want a woman calling my men's games.
Yeah.
That's fading away, which is great. But it's crazy how we're still subject to that.
And this is the last one, and then I'll move on because I hate talking about this subject. But you mentioned it on the Connections podcast, and it really resonated with me. We mentioned the prep, so we have to prep, but then we have like the extra variable of do we look a certain way? Are we framing the question a certain way that I feel like only a female mindset can relate to? And unfortunately, it's how you look, and it's the aesthetic and everything like that. And there's a beauty to the charisma that a woman, I think, brings to a broadcast or brings to an interview. But I think that for us as women, we have a few extra steps to take. And I don't think a lot of male colleagues understand. I think they do once you continue far along in the career. But can you kind of talk about that? Because I think when it comes to that aspect, the male colleagues can just like put some gel in their hair, prep and go. We can do that, but there's so many extra steps because we have to carry ourselves a certain way.
Absolutely. There is an extra step, and I hate that, but it's just what it is. And like, those are the kind of things, excuse me, that I think make us kind of more insecure if you're not feeling confident. Like I'm shorter, I'm 5'3". So occasionally my producer will be like, hey, I need you to stand on a box. And I'm like, and then I'm like thrown off, and I'm like, oh God, do I look really small and tiny next to this big athlete? How's my hair? Why didn't anyone tell me I have this random piece of hair sticking up? And usually they're like, oh, we're guys, we didn't know. And it's like, you know, it looks good. You can help me out here. So I don't know. It's just, I've really worked in therapy and just meditation and just mindset before a game to kind of say, I deserve to be here. I can handle this role. I can do great things. I can do hard things, especially when it's out of my comfort zone. Because I think if you go in anxious and feeling like, okay, they're going to judge me based on my hair, my eye makeup, how tall I am, you're going to not have a great broadcast because you have all these intrusive thoughts in your head. And I'm not saying I'm perfect at it. I'm not, but getting there. So yeah, I wish there was like an easy solution, but just kind of reminding myself that I deserve to be here. I have a place, and I can do hard things.
I love that. I want to tap your brain about the therapy and the meditation here in a little bit, but the production part is super fascinating because you mentioned the behind the scenes stuff. And like you said, like a lot of people only see the front facing, the microphone, the hair, the actual broadcast itself. We're not talking about the producers and everything like that. I know you originally wanted to be a writer. You want to do the writing aspect. You still use that. We have to be writing in a certain aspect, whether it's scripts or the research and the prep. So what about the writing aspect intrigued you at the beginning?
So when I graduated, I really wasn't in a broadcast program. It was like, I thought I wanted to be like a writer for Vogue or like writer for a fashion magazine or maybe a news or sports writer. And this is aging me, but like when I graduated, Instagram was like just coming out. Mm-hmm. People were using those old school filters and we didn't use it the way we use it now. Yeah. And, I don't know, it kind of evolved for me, but I do think the foundation of good reporting and good storytelling is really great writing. So I'm glad that I have this writing background because it's like, it set me up for success, how to tell a story, how to write a lead in, how to give the important information first, and those supporting details. But, it wasn't until I worked in production for 2 local media stations where I was like, ooh, I actually like the TV side. This is kind of fun. This is exciting. This is lively. This is fast. And then I really loved that. But I was in news at the time. And I just found the news to be so depressing, right? Like you're like,
I don't want to know what's going on around me. Don't tell me.
Like, the election, the fires, the shootings, all the stuff. And like, I was like, I'd rather be in sports where I can cover stories of triumph and trials and a player's comeback or whatever it might be. So that just kind of filled my soul more. And I think growing up in a sports loving family, that felt like the natural fit. I just didn't have that mindset in college. I thought like, I'm going to write for the Chicago Tribune. And I live in Chicago and I see the Tribune, but like, they're not in that building anymore. And the viewership is down and all these things. So it's like, we've had to pivot and we probably will pivot again.
And you are also like kind of like heading into your career and you were part of this COVID transition too, because you were updating your reel and doing all of that. So how were you able to kind of stay focused when the world was changing? Because we all had to adjust at NBC. It was a hot ass mess, but I was at least there and we were all adjusting together. Were you kind of you're on your own in that aspect?
Totally was on my own. I was working just full time in marketing and social, and then would like moonlight as a reporter on the weekends. And like, I was just grinding all the time. And when COVID hit, I was like, well, shit, I guess that's it. Like, I guess I'm not working in sports anymore. I guess it was a good run because I was just kind of getting my feet under me and started a little bit late. So like, I felt like I had lost that momentum. All the things I was doing were gone, like the softball, the high school sports, everything that I was growing and doing. They're like, hey, sorry, we're not doing any more games, COVID, So I had to kind of like pivot to like podcasts and Zoom style shows or interviews. Sorry, my dog's making noise over here.
Never apologize on the behalf of a puppy, ever. That is my number one rule of the show.
Yeah, okay, good. Because he's a little 5-month-old mini wiener dog and he's super cute. Do you want to see him?
Of course I do.
Okay, 1 second, let me grab him. Bernie, come here. Oh, this is Bernie. Hi, everyone.
Hi, Bernie. Oh my goodness, you're so precious.
Yeah, he's cute, but he's
very cute.
Yeah, he's also.
Does he think he can get away with anything?
Oh yeah. He's been ripping out my couch and stealing my socks. So anyway.
Yeah. Well, men don't outgrow that phase. So
right.
Yeah.
But yeah, to your point about COVID, it was so weird to have to say, all right, is this coming back? And how do I pivot? Because I wasn't really established then. And I still have days where I don't feel fully established and I'm always trying to gain more traction and grow and do bigger and bigger gigs. So again, my path is not traditional, but I'm still happy of how far I've come, even in the midst of COVID.
Yeah.
Once things started to come back, that's when I started getting involved with the Big East and doing more high school sports, and it all came back. And so I'm relieved.
Yeah. And, I think covering sports in COVID, I think helped a lot of people's careers in a way. Like I know how to set up a studio in my apartment now. Like it's a whole thing. You can literally call a game from your house now. It's insane. And you mentioned therapy and mindset. I think it's so cool. I'm on this healing journey and I'm in therapy and I think it's such a beautiful thing. How have you utilized therapy in your daily life?
Yeah, I try to go. I see a therapist over Zoom every other Tuesday usually. So twice a month. It's probably not even enough. I probably should go more, but we know it's expensive. And I just have been working with her on mindset and not having like this doomsday mentality. I think that like right now we're doom scrolling and we're like panicking because the state of some of these networks is in flux and you know how things are. People are spending less money on broadcasts and I get why, but it's also like it makes the future very unknown. And so I used to be and still sometimes can be like that doomsday person where I'm like, what if this? And oh no, it must mean this. And like just absolutes that are not true. And so I work with her a lot on saying, what is true? What can we do today to advance your career? If it's just one thing, one email sent, one connection made, one coffee meeting, whatever it is, just one thing. Don't overwhelm yourself trying to do like, oh, I got to send 10 emails and do this, this, and this, because when I'm not working, somebody else is working harder. And I think that's really unhealthy. You have to have the balance. So I work with her a lot on balance, calming the nerves and before a broadcast, because like before I'm doing a broadcast, I sweat, like my hands and feet.
Oh, totally.
Yeah. Like even if I feel confident in the material, I still get those nervous, excited jitters. So, yeah, I just think it's important to work with someone on that if you can. I mean, I know it's not always available to everyone, but even just talking to friends as therapy sessions, right? Like even just talking to colleagues in the industry and saying, hey, here's how I'm feeling. I'm frustrated with this. What do you think? That has helped me a lot.
If I can give a message to anybody, have somebody in this industry that you can talk to because it's different. It's so different. But it's interesting because the whole doomsday thing, it's kind of difficult to not catastrophize when you're a grinder. Because when that's all we know, right? It's a survival mentality. And when you start from the bottom and you have nothing, that's all you really know. And working for free and like freelance, you don't know when the paycheck's going to come in and when you get your reimbursements and stuff. So was that a difficult thing because that's kind of all you know and to try to balance that out? And it's got to be difficult.
It still is difficult, right? I mean, it allows me the flexibility as a freelancer to say yes and no to things and do a lot of different things. So there's the bonus, there's the plus side. But on the flip side, it's like, you're right. Like I have money coming in that I haven't seen yet. And I'm like, where is it? You know, and it's kind of like, how am I going to piece this all together? So it's fun and it's free, but it's also hectic. And I have days where I'm like debating on maybe it is time to go full time out of the business. And then I'm like, no, I still love this. I want to do it. I'm close to the next thing. And so I have those like debates with myself, like angel and devil on my shoulder, you know? But yeah, to your point, there are definitely plus and minuses to being a freelance broadcaster and doing a bunch of different things.
What about the flip side? What if it's somebody who's full-time and they're kind of contemplating going freelance? Because I feel like the more, I guess, established you get more opportunities. And I've literally been fired because I was working for a company and I did work for another company because I was naive. I didn't think it was a big deal. Like, and so it's hard to kind of balance that out. But then you have a family. I'm single. I can literally make nothing and be fine. But that's not always the case. So what if you're full-time and you want to take the leap to doing freelance? What do you think that role could look like, or what advice would you give?
Yeah, I have friends that have done that and are very successful. Some of my friends went from full-time at a local station to freelancing for CBS and the Big Ten Network and different things like that. And they're making it work. I do think it is easier when you have a partner or spouse or someone who you're like, okay, if I have months where it's not as much work, you got me, or we can help each other. It's hard when you're on your own, right? That's just the truth of it. It's hard when you're like doing it by yourself and trying to make ends meet and get enough gigs to fill your schedule and get enough gigs that pay well to fill your schedule. And that's hard too, because I think where I'm at now is like understanding my worth. Like, how much should I be paid for this game? You know, I'm currently rocking it without an agent and I'm happy about that. But at the same time, I think an agent comes in handy when they can help you negotiate for more and they know your worth. And so I don't know. It's like, I would say to people that are thinking about going from full-time to freelance, it's possible, but you have to build connections. You have to get out there in the public. You have to have those coffee meetings, and you have to be willing to like take risks and cold call. Like some of the best gigs I've gotten, Jessica, because I literally picked up the phone and I said, "Hi, I'm Kacy. I'm a freelance sports reporter. Do you need anybody?" Obviously.
Oh, I love that.
I said more than just that, but like
I'm literally making a note of that.
my first ESPN college basketball game on ESPN3 was because I literally picked up the phone and I called this school and I said, "Hey, I'm in the area. Would love to do a game if you need someone." And they said, "Hey, we already have someone, but he can't do this Thursday's game. Can you work?" And I was like, "Yep." So it was like right place, right time. Now, obviously, with that comes a lot of no's too. They're like, "Hey, we already got someone," or you get blown off and ignored. But for the chances that it is a yes, you were right place, right time. And so
absolutely,
I think people need to not be afraid to pick up the phone and send an email too. You don't want to be annoying, right? But like pick up the phone and just go for it.
I agree. I love that. And something that's interesting is, I didn't do a local station or anything like that. So it's like a non-traditional kind of view. But do you regret not possibly doing the no local news stations ever?
That's a really good question. And I vacillate on this a little bit lately because some people will tell you, hey, they really want to see that you've done local.
That's so weird to me. Yeah. I get it, but I just think that that's so bizarre.
It is. But you have other people that say, "Oh God, no, you don't have to do that." That's because you and I haven't done it, but we both have friends that do.
Right.
You know how they feel about it, right? It's not ideal. It's not easy. Some people love it, but you have to MMJ, shoot and edit your own stuff at a lot of these markets, and it's a grind. And I do respect the people that came up through that trajectory because they're killing it now. And I have friends that went that route. And those are the friends that will always advocate for you to go that route too. Because they're like, well, this worked for me, so you should do it. But I think when you look at yourself, you look at Kelly Sacco, who works in Florida. Mm-hmm. She wasn't a local news reporter either. She went the PA route into reporting. And so there are people that are doing it without doing local. So it can be done. It's a little non-traditional. It's a little bit harder. But then you have your occasional executive or agent who's like, hey, I really would have liked to see you go local. So I have days where I'm like, damn, should I have done that like in my early 20s, which just knock it out at some small market? Yeah. Now I'm looking at who I am and my lifestyle, and I'm going, I really don't want to move to like South Dakota to work in local.
Like you see the jobs available and you're like, that's not a real town. Like what?
Yeah. And I feel bad about like saying that because I know it's a start for somebody, but I just went the opposite way. And so it feels weird to go backwards now and move away from sideline and away from a big city with a lot of networks and teams to grind it out 2 years. So I haven't pulled the trigger on going local. Would I be open to it if it was the right gig, like covering the Chiefs or something? Yeah. Sure. But for right now, I think no regrets. This is my path. This is what I do. But I have days where I'm like, I should have knocked it out at like 22, fresh out of school, just to say I did it.
Yeah, for sure. Mm-hmm. I just met Kelly Sacco in person finally this season. What a delight. I love her.
Yeah. She's the best. I met her at the winter meetings and just picked her brain for a few minutes. And it's those conversations where you're like, all right, I can still do this my way. I don't have to do it the traditional way necessarily.
Well, and on that note, it's interesting because like I also didn't really I'm a college dropout too. And I was nervous to tell people that at the beginning. Yeah. Was that the same case for you? Like to like not tell people that you didn't do a local news station? Like it's not easy to just say, this is what I did in like a 3-second pitch. You kind of have to tell them the storyline. Yeah. So at the beginning, was it like that? I know we don't really give a shit what other people think, but you kind of do at the same time, right? So
you do a little bit. Yeah. And so I always find it I'm proud of it, but it's always awkward.
Yeah.
When people are like, well, where were you at locally? And I'm like, oh, I was just a producer. And they're like, oh, so you weren't on air there? And I'm like, no, because the news director told me I wasn't good enough. And I love that I proved her wrong. But at the same time, it's like, I kind of had a weird, different route. And that's kind of weird to say. Like, I literally just went out with a tripod, set it up with the iPhone and the clasp, and like did stand-ups by myself, like just to like get reps, And it was weird and it was non-traditional. And it's kind of hard to explain that to some people, but the people in your corner and that are on Team Kacy or Team Jess are going to be like, that rocks. Like, that's how you did it. That's your story. So Yeah, I get what you're saying. Like, but we have to just not care because
Yeah.
if you look at like Kevin Burkhardt, for example, he quit broadcasting, got frustrated with it, and sold cars.
Yeah.
He became a car salesman, and people have heard his story a ton of times now, but like, he's not embarrassed to tell that story. He tells it. He didn't go local. He had a non-traditional route that took a while too. And so I don't know. I see what you mean on like having to explain.
Imagine how good our 30 for 30 is going to be, babe.
Exactly.
Like, it's going to be so good. It's going to be so good.
I always compare it to like when people ask you about a tattoo that you have that you don't like love anymore, and you're like, oh, I got it in college. Don't look at it, you know. But like, who cares? Like, that was part of your journey then.
Oh, I love that. That is true. I love that. And it's also really inspiring. Like, it's really cool to see you do so many different sports. And I'm not just talking about the big four, right? Like, you're doing all these sports that you don't even think that need coverage. You're doing track and field and all these other things. So how do you prep for those things? Because when I think of the sports I've covered, the prep is relatively easy because there's so much at your fingertips, but that's not always the case with these one-offs that like maybe even Olympic type sports that like there's not a lot of coverage. So how do you prep for not just the different sports, but so many different sports at the same time?
Yeah. And you're a baseball queen, and I love that because I love baseball too. So I'll have to pick your brain at a later date about your prep. But yeah, like it's one thing to do the college baseball or college softball where there's information, there's SIDs, but then you're doing like for example, I did field hockey, and I knew nothing about field hockey. I'm not going to lie and tell you I've been a big field hockey fan forever. I didn't know anything about it, but I knew that it was Big East field hockey, and it was on FS1. And I was like, hell yeah, I'm going to do that. Yeah. I will be the next field hockey expert for that gig. Yeah. And so I just talked to people who play, who cover it, who are referees for it and officials for it, and just try to learn as much as I could. But you're right. It's like, especially on the high school level, I do the state finals in Illinois for basketball and football. There's like no information out there. Yes, you have your occasional Chicago Tribune or some Sun-Times article, but like the stats aren't provided for you. The information isn't provided for you like it is in college and pro sports. And so you got to go dig and do those coach calls and meet with players. And it's weird too, because you can't just be like, hey, can I talk to the quarterback? You got to go through the coach, get approval. So there's some extra steps, but I feel like it makes you really good at prep and research when you've done those kinds of things where there's just not a lot out there. Track and field's another one. Like, there's just not a lot of info, and it's such an individualized sport. So I'm doing sideline interviews after they're finished their race, and they're like, and they're about to like throw up, right? Yeah. But I'm like interviewing them, hoping they don't vomit on camera. And it's weird because there's not a lot of information on them, right? So you're trying not to be generic with your questions and talk about the in the moment stuff. What did I see on that last leg, on that turn? What have I noticed about you and your teammates? So you have to pivot and be creative, but I think there are ways around it. And if you can do those lower level or Olympic sports that don't have as much info out there, then you can do the big stuff, no problem.
Yeah, it's always kind of interesting to see that because I just know like a lot of the prep and like same thing, like even if I'm covering a huge game, I still have to go out and ask the questions because not everything's going to be covered and you want to be ridiculously prepped. Yeah. When it comes to, balancing all of this, because freelance is unique where you don't know when your next job is going to come. So when you have that going and still trying to balance a social life, how do you do that, or do you?
That's really hard, especially in football season. It's tough. My friend is getting married in November, and I don't think I'm going to be able to go to her wedding. Yeah. She doesn't know that yet. I hope she's not watching. She planned it on a Saturday in November, and like I'll be, covering Illini football probably that same weekend, and so it sucks. And I'm going to try to make it to the shower and the bachelorette party, but you kind of have to make sacrifices. Yeah. And I think maybe you can relate to this. Like after you finish a game, your friends are like, hey, meet us out for a drink. And I'm like, I was just on for 4 hours. Like, I don't want to be on again. I just want to like lay. I have done that, but sometimes I'm like, I want to lay down. I want to come down from like my energy and just like chill. And so I think it is hard to balance the social life with this job. And you find ways, you find weekends off, but it's what we love too. So I feel like it's part of our social life.
I'm so glad you said that. I don't think people understand that. Because if you're a 9-to-5er, you want to get away from Bob in the cubicle. You want to get away from that. So sometimes, and I was talking to my therapist about it too. Like, that's why, like with dating and stuff, like I feel like I date all day. I feel like I'm always having conversations with people. I'm interviewing them.
Mm-hmm.
But you want me to go do that again? Like, I'm good. I already did that all day.
Right.
So it's, and so tell me that too, because it's hard to explain for other people. Like when you have a 4-hour, you're on, and that's just like the game itself. You get there early, you have to prep, you do the locker room availability, the media availability, and all of that. And you come, like, what's your routine when you're done with the game? Say you have no social stuff to do afterwards, you're not invited. Do you drive home with the music off? Do you have the music blaring? What's your routine?
I usually will call like loved ones, like my boyfriend, my parents, and talk about how it went, and you just kind of digest that. But my rule, Jess, is that I will never watch my stuff right back away. Like I will never like I want to watch it right away. I give myself like 2 or 3 days because I just need like a break from it, you know? Mm-hmm. So after 2 or 3 days have passed, I'll finally rewatch the footage or whatever I have and kind of go through it, see what I liked, see what I didn't like, and what I could improve upon. But yeah, I like to just like come back and unwind, like pet my dog, take it out for a walk, and maybe have a glass of wine or just like watch a movie. But it's interesting for us because even when we're not working, we're usually at games, right? Like I'll go to a Cubs game when I'm not covering a game, because that's fun for us. Like we enjoy being there and being able to kind of turn our brain off for a little bit.
Yeah. Do you remember what you say in some of these things if you're like watching it back 2 or 3 days, or you're like, oh yeah, that's right, I did ask that question? Because I black out.
Do you do that? I don't know.
I don't remember anything sometimes.
You like black out, yeah. Sometimes I'm like, oh, I think I said this weird, and then I watch it back and I go, oh, I was pretty good. I recovered.
Right. That happened literally yesterday. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So it depends, but sometimes I'll know right away that I screwed something up, and I'll be like, shit, I gotta recover, you know. And I used to I was telling people this last week. I was like, I used to wear it on my face when I would screw up a hit. Like you could tell on my face that I was like wearing it.
Yeah.
And I tried to like be like, okay, pivot, just crush the next one. It's okay. Mm-hmm. It's not your best one, whatever. Throw it away, keep moving. Because I used to be like, oh, that was so bad. And the next one will be bad too. And then you spiral. So yeah, I don't know. Sometimes I remember what I said, and sometimes I'm like, I don't even know what I said.
Yeah.
What did I just say there?
Yeah. I'm so glad you said that too. Cause like the other day I was like, that was the worst intro I've ever had in my life. And same thing. I don't like to listen to my stuff, but they replay it at the Coliseum a lot. And I was like, oh, okay. That wasn't too bad. I don't love hearing my voice because it goes into the bathrooms, Kacy. It goes into the bathrooms.
So you're like,
and so my colleagues would be like, I heard you when I was washing my hands. I was like, that means you also heard me while you were going to like, come on. I don't know.
No, we all hate our own voice, and it's so funny because people are like, why do you hate your own voice but you work in broadcasting? You're like, do you ever like listening to a voicemail of your own voice? Like, no.
Yeah.
You know? But we're all our own toughest critics, and
totally.
I think like half the time people don't even notice the little faux pas that we notice.
Absolutely. Mm-hmm. And tell me about I don't want to call them failures, but like I think when you have those mental moments, how have you shifted over the years of your first whoopsie on a broadcast compared to now?
That's a good question. I think that, like I said, I used to just like let it take over me, and the therapy has helped, and just having great people in my corner has helped. I used to let it kind of take over me, and like I would like spiral. I'd be like, I can't do this. I'm not good enough. You know, other people aren't messing up the way I am. And I had to kind of unplug and like stop comparing, because I was like, my journey is different than yours, than someone else's. It's hard to do in where we're at with social media, to like turn off like everyone else's gigs. But I got advice once from my friend Connor, who works for the Big Ten. He was like, Case, when I finally like turned off the noise and everybody outside and like where I thought I should be, that's when like gigs started to come. Like when he zeroed in and went like laser focus, tunnel vision, as hard as that is to do, that's when more work started to come, because he was being himself. And so, okay, stop trying to be whoever you emulate or whoever you really love watching. Be Kacy, because there's only one of you, and this network hired you. So I don't know. I like I said, I used to just like let it take over my whole weekend and ruin my day, and I had to like stop that, because it was affecting my friendships, my relationships.
Yeah.
You know, my mom would be like, I can't hear you complain about this another second. Like, you're good.
Mhm.
Keep going. Do better the next time. You got this. But I think in our industry, it's so hard because we feel like we just had that one shot, you know?
Yeah. And you mentioned kind of the authenticity that Connor talked to you about. Was that something that was easy for you to grasp, or did you have to kind of learn it over time?
No, it's not easy. I think I'm still grasping it. I think because more than just him have said that to me.
Yeah.
Said, you know, when I finally was talking to Hannah Yates, who does some games for the Braves, who's so sweet. And she was kind of debating at one point getting out of the industry and talking about her path. And she said, when I finally kind of let go and let God handle it and just focused on me, that's when the door started to open. And obviously I'm not here to tell her story, but it was just really motivating advice that I really appreciated but every time you say that, you're like, well, I am doing that. What do you mean? I am letting go. I am. And nothing's happening.
That means you're not. That means you're not. Yeah.
Exactly. So it has been a gradual process. It's not like it just clicked one day and I think I'm still doing it. And even now, like getting the DePaul podcast and working with the Illini and doing some of the gigs I'm doing now, I'm finally feeling like, Case, you're in your groove. People are hiring you for you. This is the momentum that you've been wanting. So keep staying on that path. So it's been good, but yeah, I still have days where I go back and forth.
I'm so glad you mentioned surrender, because this is like the thing that I've been trying to do with God lately is, because I suck at it. I'm a control freak. And we just claimed this player, Tristan Gray, off waivers from the Marlins. And I went to Sacramento to call a AAA game, and he was assigned to AAA. So I got him on the pregame show, and I was talking to him, and he was talking about his faith. And I hear a thing in my ear say, wouldn't it be funny? He was talking about surrendering because you suck at it. And literally Tristan goes, and I have to surrender to God. I'm like, son of a bitch.
That was fine. It was fine.
I was like, okay. And so I told him about it, and he got chills. It was such a beautiful moment.
Yeah, I love
it
that.
was one of those things where I'm like, okay. And same thing, like, I think I was trying to like control the narrative that I already created about my career, about everything else. And I'm working for an organization that's going through a lot. And I understand that there's nothing I can do. And it's so hard for me to grasp that. And I think, like you mentioned, the RSNs, there's so many things that are that we can't control that are literally light years out of our reach, not even just beyond our pay grades, but like light years. And I don't think like we're little just as we are, and we think we can take control of all these things, and it's impossible. And I think that that's such a beautiful message, because it's like, okay, just do what you got to do. We know what we're supposed to do. Why do we think we have to handle everything? It's so
totally. And we know we're good at what we do. We're
Yeah.
in the rooms that we're in and doing the jobs and the games that we're doing. And I think, like you said, like relinquishing that control is hard to do for someone who's type A, like both of us.
Yeah.
We want to just like figure it out, have our schedule, know what's next. And I remember doing the FS1 college baseball game for the Big East in May. And I didn't have anything lined up after that. Nothing.
Yeah.
I know we're into football season now, and I've got these great gigs, but like in May, when I finished that game on FS1, I was about to do my post-game interview with coach. And I said, Case, if this is it, this is your last thing you do, because you have nothing lined up yet, kill it. Like, you got to crush this, because it could be your last one. Now it hasn't been, which I'm so grateful it hasn't been my last one. But like just zeroing in on that moment and knowing that like everything else around you is not in your control. Like I used to get so upset, like, why isn't this network hiring me? Why don't they want me? And it's like, they might have budget restrictions. They might be looking for a certain look or a certain person. Yeah. They might be up against an agent pushing them to hire someone, like whatever it is, has nothing to do with my talent. It doesn't mean I'm not good at it. But it's hard to remind yourself of that constantly, because you're like, you go back to like the basics. You go, well, if I was really good enough, they'd want me.
Yeah.
That's not the case.
That's not.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And that's hard sometimes. And it's something I literally, at least twice a week, it happens in my mind. Yeah, so just one of those things. And I wanted to, it's when I think of like a college football sideline reporter, it's what I want to emulate so bad. And like baseball is a different animal, as you know, and it's like a different vibe, and it's a different prep, and it's something every single day. And I feel like when you describe a college football reporter, how would you do that?
As myself, you mean? Like when I do it?
Yeah.
That's a great question. You're right. It is so different than baseball. And baseball is my first love too. But I loved covering college football and high school football as well. I think you have to be as sharp and as ready as your analyst and your play-by-play, because it's easy to get drowned out in the noise of the crowd and the players, and everyone's bigger than you and everything's just more grandiose in college football. And you have to kind of be the eyes and the ears and what people at home don't know and can't see. But you also, like, you have fun with it, but it's also serious, right? You're doing injury reports and you're delivering intense information at times, and you're trying to run back and forth to both sidelines. And with baseball, it's a little bit more conversational, and you can kind of talk for an inning. I mean, obviously the game is faster now, but it still can be conversational. You could pick up something where you left off. And football, it's like, it changes like this, and then you're like, okay, never mind. I'm going to do a totally different hit now, or I'm going to throw that one away. And so you got to be able to pivot. You have to be on point and just be as like big in your mind as everybody else is, because I think it's easy to get like swallowed up, especially because we're small, like, you know, but it's so funny.
Like, what's the child doing on the field? I'm like, no, that's me.
Like trying not to get hit by like, but yeah, I think it is, it's interesting, and you kind of have to pay attention too. Like, yes, you're paying attention for every game, but like pick up on the little things that coach did on the sideline, or what did you see the defensive linemen talk about in their little huddle, or just delivering those little bits of information that not only relate to what you prep before the game, but what's happening in the moment and how it's changing. Because you could have prepped for hours before the game, and then the game goes.
Use none of it. Use none of it.
Really use none of it.
Biggest pet peeve. Like, I swear I know what I'm talking about. And I had this amazing conversation with this player about childhood trauma, and we couldn't get to it. Drives me.
And also, I think there's awareness in like not delivering a hit that doesn't make sense for the moment, right? Like sometimes people will do a hit, and I'm like, that person's not even playing right now. They're not even in the game. Like, you know, and so I know we all make mistakes, but it's like having that awareness, having that just kind of comfortability and that strength, I think is really the three keys.
Yeah. All right. Let's shift to some Chicago sports.
Hey.
I'm really excited to talk to you about Caleb Williams, because when it comes to this guy, it feels like the quarterback problem has been solved for Chicago. GM's talking about it. There's confidence there. What can he bring to this Bears squad that, I mean, let's be honest, the future's looking really bright, not just now, but for a long time. Kind of what the Bears fans need.
Yeah, I think for a long time we've been like high on certain players, and then it ends up not panning out. Like, I did like Justin Fields. I'm from Ohio, right? Like, he was a Buckeye. So I just feel like the pieces weren't around him to make it happen, and the front office and the GM didn't make it work for him. Now, I think he had some trouble in the pocket, and he took a lot of time. Definitely more of a run-first quarterback, but Caleb is both, and you're seeing his progression, and you're seeing how he's on Hard Knocks kind of taking in the information and working with a lot of these coaches, and he's like absorbing everything, and he's not too big for it. Yes, he's kind of a celebrity from USC who has his nails painted, and he's like more, you know, eccentric, and that's great, because I think Chicago is used to people like that. Like, we had Dennis Rodman on the Bulls. Like, it's okay to have this guy who's a little bit loud and different and bring energy into the locker room, because the guys have all really responded well to it. Like, you see how he's bonded with Cole Kmet and the backup quarterbacks, Tyson Bagent. So, like, you see, not only is he like a team guy, but he's also has that confidence and cockiness about him that's not too much, where he's like a diva. But he has that perfect balance right now. And I'm excited. I know it's just preseason, but like these victories that they had where he wasn't even starting, well, right, this team has more depth than ever. And Caleb has kind of introduced like the claw thing that he does, you know? Yeah. And people love that. Chicago fans love that energy. And so it's like, this is what they've wanted for so long. And I'm just hoping and praying that it ends up, they win a few more games this year. I'm not saying they're Super Bowl contenders.
I was going to ask that. So what does that mean then? Like, how much pressure is there? Is it Super Bowl or bust? Are fans going to give them the leeway a little bit? Is it going to be okay for a while, or is it everything and then or nothing?
I think Chicago fans are going to be really happy with like 7, 8, 9 wins. Honestly, I think they are going to give leeway, because they know the NFC North is such a tough division. You have the Lions, who are clearly Super Bowl contenders. They have such a great defense. Dan Campbell's not hard to root for. I mean, he's such an awesome coach. And you have Jordan Love and the Packers, who are going to be competitive too. I mean, it's like the blue blood, once again, it's back. And I think the biggest question is the Vikings and JJ McCarthy. That's where your biggest hole is. So I don't know. I think Chicago fans are going to be lenient. I think they're going to be okay with more wins than last year. They're just wanting to see progress. They're simple people, but really in Chicago, we just want to see progress, you know?
Yeah, and I'm really excited to see McCarthy too. Athletic quarterbacks going up against each other is always a good thing. And speaking of Hard Knocks, it's always kind of an interesting output because you've heard it could be a distraction, and I think it's cool. Like we're doing documentaries. Netflix is finally doing something on a baseball team with the Red Sox. I think it's great.
Yeah.
What are your thoughts on these documentaries, these shows kind of following football teams around?
I love it. I feel like it has united Chicago more than just Bears in training camp. People are sitting down. We're sitting down to watch these episodes right when they air on HBO. And the one time it was like delayed for an hour. And people were like, "What the hell? Like, where's the episode?" It's united Chicago. It was kind of like when The Last Dance came out. The Bulls, the Michael Jordan documentary.
Oh, yeah.
People would just sit down and watch that and be so excited and talk about it for weeks on sports radio. And that's what's happening with Hard Knocks. I love it. I think it shines a light on these guys that we don't see, right?
Yeah.
Like you're learning about Matt Eberflus and why he has the new haircut and the new beard that he has and why his wife inspired him to do that. You're seeing these guys on a personal level, like their faith coming out or their relationships or their goals after football. Like, you know, I think it's really cool. And like, I was laughing at I think it was the 4th episode where they were trying to buy dude wipes, like pick up dude wipes. And the offensive lineman brought back Clorox wipes. And I was like, what? Like, you can't use those.
See what happens there.
Right. And so just like the funny stuff, but also the serious stuff about this team. I'm glad that the McCaskies in the front office with the Chicago Bears were open to this because it's easily one of those franchises where you could be like, no, we're the Bears. We're buttoned up. And I've loved seeing kind of an inside look.
Well, and what's interesting about the whole thing is like the pop culture aspect of it all. And, you know, we both cover baseball too. And I feel like it's more intimate in baseball because this is going to sound silly, but they're not wearing helmets, right? And I know that sounds so silly, but I hear athletes talking about it all the time. Like you can see their faces in basketball and baseball and football. You have no idea what these guys look like until they're done with the game.
Sure.
And it's so interesting to kind of put a face to who these guys are. And then you take the step back of this is who they are. And I'm glad that people are seeing it because when you say it out loud, it sounds silly, right? Like, okay, well, yeah, they're not showing their faces because they're protected, but it's a whole thing. Like, despite football being the most popular sport in America, we don't know who these guys are really. And we should because it's the most popular sport. It's
Absolutely.
crazy.
I know. I agree. And I didn't even think about that. Like, you're right. You can't see facial expression in helmets. And you can't even see kind of like, even when I went to training camp, I borrowed my friend's binoculars because I was like, I want to see these guys up close. Like, you're still kind of sitting far away at training camp. And I was like, I want to like see their facial expressions and how they're interacting with each other. And like you saw in Hard Knocks when they're singing, like the rookies are singing and telling people like, their rookie contract extension and what their bonus was. And I don't know, it's just been cool to see. I'm kind of sad it's over already.
I know. And I'm really glad that they have that. And same with Bears fans, like it's like the Mets almost, you know, like they get all these great players and it just like nothing happens and it sucks. So it's kind of like that, I could imagine. So I pray for y'all. Let's talk Cubs. When it comes to the NL Central, it's very interesting. The Brewers are running away with it. It's great to see. Cubs aren't too far behind. I believe 9 games behind from the moment of this taping. Right. They do have a tough schedule because the Oakland A's will be in town. But, and I'm happy to say that. You know how good it is to ask Mark Kotze, you know, the A's have a good chance to shake up some of these playoff teams. We haven't noticed that in years. So what do the Cubs need to do to kind of work off of what they've continued success on?
Well, you saw the run total improved over the past couple games, and they had that win streak, and yes, they've lost a couple to the Pirates, but then you see the combined no-hitter the other night. I mean, that's awesome, and I love it because one of my friends, Alex Cohen, was calling the game. And so,
I love Alex.
Yeah, you know Alex. It was great to see him get that opportunity and get a really cool game, and I think he's actually doing the game today too. But the combined no-hitter, obviously historic, and you see kind of the camaraderie amongst the team improve. Like we saw the Taylor Swift candle that Counsell has, and they're lighting it before every game, and it's tradition. And you see Taylor interviewing them about it and kind of like, the Cubs don't normally have that stuff. They haven't had something like that since they had that waffle maker in the dugout.
Yes.
They were like pouting for whatever reason. And I like seeing that stuff because, when they're vibing in the clubhouse and off the field, they're vibing on the field too. And so it's cool to see them get hot now, but you struggle with Lopez and Justin Steele's injury. Like, he's on 10, 15-day IL, and I think Craig Counsell's not going to push it because are the Cubs kind of out of the race? I mean, it's kind of like, do you push it or do you have him come back to say, okay, just to show him that he can come back from that? But the pitching obviously takes a hit with this, and I don't know. I feel like I hate to say it's like over for them, but I think they still could make strides. It's just kind of tough when you're 9 games back from the Brewers, and I hate saying that because obviously it's Craig Counsell's former team, right? I don't know. I think if they can continue to get hot, and I know it's going to be hard, but you saw Shota and Managa go 7 innings, no hits, and then Pearson and Hodge finished the job, but they play the Yankees today, and so I'm curious to see how that'll shake out. I think this series against the Yankees will kind of determine if we're totally out of it or is there still some fight left.
Yeah, when it comes to these pitcher injuries, it's difficult because, like, obviously transactions can still be made, but is there an aspect? Because it makes me think of the Mariners. The Mariners they were stacked with starting pitching, no better pitching rotation, but then the hitting wasn't there. So it's like you can only lean on the pitching too much. So in this case, do they have enough offensive power to kind of make up for the pitching? But then here's the thing, in the postseason, what wins? Usually your starting pitching is going to take it all. And that's if you even have the health of those guys. And you're right. Do we push them to get to the postseason? And you get to the postseason and then you're screwed. So it's kind of, I'm glad I'm not the manager or the front office to make those decisions. So do they have enough offensive prowess to get there? I guess.
I think they do. It's tough. But like you said, when you're looking at wild card contention, you have to have pitching. And so I don't know. I need to look more at their schedule of who they're playing through the rest of the season. But I don't know. I hate to be like the Debbie Downer. I just don't know if it's going to be enough to get them over the edge. And I hate to see them get close to the wild card and then still not get in or whatever have you. Hopefully the Taylor Swift candle can continue to burn because
honestly, we need all we can get. Last one before I let you go, how has Counsell been embraced by Cubs fans?
I think at first people were a little bit, at least for me, like when I was at the winter meetings, I think people were like excited. Obviously they were shocked by the news, right? They were like, what? Where did this come from?
I'm still like, whoa.
Yeah, like David Ross was out before we even knew he was out. And so that was like wild. I think they definitely embraced him knowing he's such a great coach and he has the chops, but he's a different coach. He's a little more quiet, a little more reserved. He didn't really go out of his comfort zone a little bit. So people thought at first, like, he's just quiet. I don't know. I can't get a lot out of him. I can't read him. But I think people believe in what he can do for this Cubs team, and it's not going to happen in one season. It's not going to be overnight. The fact that they're even where they are at now is kind of surprising because of the way that they started out in April, May, June. So, yeah, I think he's been embraced. I think people kind of love that they stole him from the Brewers, like that rivalry of Chicago and Milwaukee. But, yeah, I don't know, Cubs fans, I think just maybe lack a little bit of patience. And I say that with love. And they're like, oh, we haven't won since 2016, and we got rid of all of our guys. We got rid of Baez and Rizzo and Bryant. Sure. But if you're looking at my former team, Cleveland, we've had to wait even longer for even a World Series win. Yeah. So we have the longest drought now. And I think it's like, hang tight, like let Counsell cook, let this work a little bit. But we just want win. And people are like, well, it's the Chicago market. We're acting like a small market team. They've made strides adding to the bullpen, adding great guys on this roster. But I think it's going to take more time. I don't think this year is the year.
I agree. And Counsell's a guy to I think he needs to kind of gel a little bit more and embrace things. And I think it's a great first start. I mean, and you're right. I think Cubs fans have always kind of been that team where it's like, now or bust. And I think it's okay to kind of take it back and building off of a really tough firing. And it's difficult, especially how it all went down.
Yeah. It was uncomfortable because I like David Ross in that spot.
Me too.
You saw him giving the middle finger to, on camera. Like, he was just a different guy. And so, and he was part of that 2016 team. And so to see kind of the transition and bringing over enemy lines has been interesting. But I do like him. If he can keep the camaraderie going with the guys and kind of keep getting to know who they are as people, it's going to develop.
Yeah. And I'm glad you mentioned Cleveland, because I believe in Stephen Vogt. He's one of my favorite people. One of my literal favorite people. Top probably 3 moment of mine was covering his final at bat in an A's uniform. Actually, as a player, hit a home run, and his kids got to actually announce his walk up. Like, can't relive it because I cry every time. It was the most beautiful moment. And I've seen that man cry more than any other person in the world. And he's a beautiful human. I love the way he carries himself, the way he manages. I'm not surprised that team's very successful.
Yeah, that was another weird move, right? Like, to lose Francona, who everybody loved, and he was there for so long. And it used to be like, in Tito we trust. And then, a lot of shifts over there, but they're killing it. I mean, the AL Central, it's such an exciting race. And it's weird kind of being in Chicago as a former Cleveland fan, because that 2016 World Series was obviously when I was still in Ohio. And I was like, it was like the worst day of my life. Like,
right.
And now I'm here and I embrace the Cubs as my North Side team. So everyone's like, what do you mean you're a traitor? I'm like, listen, I just love good baseball.
Yeah, I'm right there with you. I have an affinity for the Diamondbacks. Everybody just relax. It's okay. Everything's going to, I'd root for the Giants. Bob Melvin's my former manager. We're going to be okay, everyone. It's all good.
Yes. I'm glad you can relate.
Yeah. Kacy, you've been fantastic. Thank you so much for your time. This was a blast.
It went really fast. I can't believe
it. It really, I looked and now it's like when you have like a FaceTime date, you're like, oh my gosh, this is
I've been FaceTiming for so long.
You're the best. Thank you.
Yes, thank you so much. I appreciate it. And I hope we get to talk again soon.
Definitely. That was Kacy Standohar, Chicago-based reporter for the Big East, FS1, and Fighting Illini. She does a little bit of everything. Like I said, freelancing for pretty much anyone you could imagine. I just appreciate her time. And then, like I said, the girls that get it, get it. Thank you so much for tuning in to Shorten the Point on Awful Announcing and the Comeback. We're heading into the off season. I worked 13, 14 days straight. I'm a little cuckoo at the moment, but I appreciate you guys tuning in. Some really fun stuff coming up, and we'll see you next time.
Want even more short and to the point? Follow Jessica at Kleinschmidt JD and head over to thecomeback.com and awfulannouncing.com.